My husband hid a camera in our bedroom, faked a birth plan to deny me pain relief, and did the unspeakable to me while I was in labor. When I begged him to stop, he smiled and said, "This is what real wives do." I didn't make a sound. That was 19 months ago. Today, his parents act like he doesn't exist. It wasn't until I got pregnant that I realized Jake wasn't like the other guys, because he was worse. Out of nowhere, my husband turned from every girl's dream guy to a complete psycho. At 4 months pregnant, he told me my baby bump would attract unwanted attention, and if I didn't cover up, that made me a W word. So what outsiders probably saw as Jake being attentive and protective, I felt suffocated. He installed a new safety app on my phone that tracked every movement, insisting it was for both my well-being and the baby's. And even in summer, he only allowed me to go outside if I wore a full-length trench coat, because in his words this protected me from anyone who was targeting pregnant women. But I told myself it was just paternal instinct, and it would go away after I gave birth. Spoiler alert, it never did. Soon he was hiding his search history from me and locked the door of his office when he was in there, something he never did before. But I knew he wasn't cheating, simply because he couldn't. He was an engineer, so his workforce was all male, and he was working almost 70 hours a week. And that's when the jokes came. At first they were tame. "Nothing's hotter than a woman carrying proof she's fertile," he'd say while slapping my butt, or sometimes he'd call me a breeding goddess. Honestly, they made me giggle and sometimes even blush. But then they took a very dark turn. Sometimes when I'd use his computer to research stuff about the baby, his search recommendations would come up. There was a lot of stuff about myophilia. If you don't know what that means, look it up. And he had watched hundreds of videos of women giving birth, but I was too scared to confront him, partially because I didn't want him to get mad at me, but mainly because of my pregnancy symptoms. I was throwing up for an hour every morning and could barely stand on my own without feeling like my spine was about to snap in two. So I let my body speak, and it told me to keep the peace. So I listened. And unfortunately, I learned my lesson too late. Actually, I learned it right when my water broke, because when I grabbed my phone to call my sister, Jake grabbed it from me. "Hey, Gabby, everything is completely under control, but I don't think it's best for you to show up. We'll let you know when you should visit." I wanted to yell at him, but the pain was too overbearing, so I just focused on trying to keep myself sane while we drove to the hospital. When we got there, I was practically thirsting for an epidural, pain relief. The pain had gotten so bad I felt like every nerve in my body was trying to escape through my hips. But just as the nurse came in to give it to me, Jake intervened. "She wanted a natural birth. Please respect our wishes," he said while showing her a fake birth plan that I had never seen before. My thoughts were completely scrambled. When the medical staff left for a monitoring equipment change, I thought he was going to hand me something stronger, but he didn't. And while I begged him to get me painkillers, he just stared at me. "Stop asking. I have a better idea." His eyes were cold, unforgiving. It's proven that when a woman works to please her husband during childbirth, it releases natural endorphins to help pain relief. As soon as he said the words pain relief, my delirious mind completely stopped thinking about anything else. I just needed it to end. Next thing I knew, Jake was zipping up his jeans, my mouth was covered in saliva, and Dr. D came into the room. I was so out of it that all I wanted was comfort from my husband, so I let him hold me and caress my head. Jake told her to get out, and told her that the reason I was crying was because I wanted to be left alone. I felt her eyes glance over at me, but I was in too much pain to say no or even just shake my head, so she took Jake's word for it and left. What Jake did in that room while I gave birth is something I still have nightmares about. Even as I write this post, tears are falling onto my screen. I won't go into detail, but it was every disgusting sexual act you could think of, probably worse. So much so that when my baby finally popped out, Jake was even more exhausted than me. And when he fell asleep in the chair beside me, I finally called my mom, dad, and sister. They didn't say a word, just kept their arms around me while I broke down. And even though I never wanted to discuss that experience with a human being, I knew I had to keep me and my baby girl Isadora safe. So I texted them what happened. Immediately, my dad blackmailed Jake into leaving. As soon as he left, I finally felt safe enough to fall asleep. And I didn't know it at the time, but my dad was about to make my husband pay, and my life was about to change. Forever. I woke up to the sound of my baby crying. The nurses brought her to me for feeding. I was still sore and exhausted, but holding Isadora made everything else fade away for a moment. My mom sat beside me, stroking my hair while I nursed my daughter. My sister Gabby paced the room, checking her phone every few minutes. My dad wasn't there. No one mentioned Jake. We stayed in the hospital for 2 more days. The nurses were kind, but I noticed how they whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. I caught fragments about the husband and strange behavior. One nurse, Marissa, stayed with me longer than necessary. She slipped me a card for a women's resource center before I was discharged. My parents insisted I come stay with them. I didn't argue. I packed up Isadora's things and left without even looking at Jake's side of the room. My dad finally showed up as we were leaving. His knuckles were bruised. He wouldn't make eye contact with me. I didn't ask questions. The first week at my parents' house passed in a blur of sleepless nights and diaper changes. I jumped every time my phone buzzed. Jake texted constantly, first apologizing, then demanding to see his daughter. I blocked his number after he sent a message saying he couldn't wait to watch me breastfeed. My dad finally told me what happened after he left the hospital that day. He went straight to our house, packed up my essential belongings, and waited for Jake. When Jake showed up, my dad confronted him with what I'd texted. Jake denied everything, claimed I was hormonal and confused. That's when my dad lost it. He didn't give me details, but made it clear Jake wouldn't be bothering us for a while. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks after Isadora was born, I was trying to establish some kind of routine. My mom helped with the baby while I showered. I came out of the bathroom to find my phone lighting up with notifications. Jake had created a private social media group with both our families and closest friends. He'd posted a long message about how I was suffering from postpartum psychosis, making up horrible stories about him, and keeping him from his daughter. My hands shook as I scrolled through the comments. Most people were concerned, offering prayers and support to him. His parents wrote about how they were heartbroken not to meet their granddaughter. My cousin Marcus, who'd always liked Jake, messaged me privately asking if I needed professional help. I threw my phone across the room. My mom came running in. I couldn't even explain through my tears. She picked up my phone, read everything, and immediately called my dad. Within an hour, they had a plan. My sister would stay with me and the baby while my parents went to handle things. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking on Isadora, terrified Jake would somehow get in and take her. Gabby tried to distract me with movies and ice cream, but nothing helped. Around midnight, I heard a car in the driveway. I peeked through the blinds and saw Jake's car. My heart nearly stopped. Gabby called the police while I grabbed Isadora from her bassinet. We locked ourselves in the bathroom. I could hear Jake pounding on the front door, yelling my name. The minutes stretched like hours before I heard sirens. The pounding stopped. Through the bathroom window, I watched the police talk to Jake. He was gesturing wildly, pointing at the house. Eventually, they made him leave. My parents returned the next morning. They'd been to see a lawyer friend, Tara Novak. She helped them file an emergency protective order against Jake. My dad handed me a folder of paperwork. Divorce papers were already drawn up. All I had to do was sign. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt numb. This wasn't how my life was supposed to go. Jake and I had been together since college. He'd been sweet, funny, ambitious. When did he change? Or was this who he'd always been, just waiting for the right moment to show his true self? The protective order gave me some peace of mind, but Jake found ways around it. He started sending gifts for Isadora to my parents' house. Expensive baby clothes, toys, a custom-made crib. Each package included a note about how much he missed his girls. I threw everything away. When Isadora was a month old, I finally agreed to meet with Tara to discuss the divorce. She was straightforward and kind, explaining my options without judgment. As I described Jake's behavior during my pregnancy and birth, her expression darkened. "This isn't just grounds for divorce," she said. "What he did to you in the hospital was assault. We should consider pressing charges." The thought of having to testify, of people hearing the details of what happened, made me physically ill. I shook my head. "I just want him gone. I want to protect my daughter." Tara nodded, understanding. "Let's focus on the divorce and custody then, but keep a record of everything. Every text, every gift, every time he shows up uninvited. Document it all." I started keeping a journal. Each night after putting Isadora to bed, I wrote down every interaction with Jake, every strange feeling, every nightmare. It helped somehow, getting it all out of my head and onto paper. Jake contested the divorce, of course. He demanded joint custody and visitation rights. The thought of Isadora alone with him made me sick. Tara assured me that given his behavior, supervised visitation was the most he could hope for. 3 months after Isadora's birth, I finally felt strong enough to go back to our house. My dad and brother-in-law Theo came with me. The place looked exactly as I'd left it, except for Jake's office. The door was wide open, the room completely empty. No computer, no files, nothing on the walls. Even the desk was gone. I went through the rest of the house, packing up clothes and personal items I wanted to keep. In our bedroom, I found a box hidden in the back of the closet. Inside were dozens of flash drives labeled with dates corresponding to my pregnancy. My hands trembled as I showed them to my dad. We took the drives to Tara's office. She had her IT guy, Vincent, check them. They contained videos, recordings of me sleeping, showering, changing clothes, all taken without my knowledge during my pregnancy. There were also folders of birth videos Jake had downloaded, edited to put my face on the women's bodies. Tara immediately filed for an amended protective order. The evidence was enough for the judge to grant a temporary full custody order. Jake would have no contact with Isadora until a full hearing could be held. I thought this would make Jake back off. Instead, it made him more determined. He started showing up at my parents' house at random times, just sitting in his car across the street. The police were called repeatedly, but since he stayed on public property and never approached the house, they couldn't do much. One night, I woke to the sound of breaking glass. My dad was already up, baseball bat in hand. Someone had thrown a rock through the living room window. Attached was a note. "I just want to see my daughter. Why are you making this so hard?" The police came, took the rock and note as evidence. They promised to drive by more frequently. It didn't make me feel safer. I was exhausted, constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every sound. Isadora sensed my anxiety and became fussier, harder to soothe. I felt like I was failing her, the one person I was supposed to protect, and I couldn't even provide a sense of security. My mom suggested I talk to someone. She found a therapist, Dr. Leanne Hill, who specialized in trauma and new mothers. I was reluctant at first, but after another sleepless night, I agreed to go. Dr. Hill's office was warm and comfortable, nothing like the sterile therapy rooms I'd imagined. She listened without judgment as I haltingly told her about Jake, the pregnancy, the birth. I couldn't bring myself to share the worst details, but she seemed to understand anyway. "What you're experiencing is a normal response to trauma," she told me. "You're not crazy, and you're not overreacting. Your body and mind are trying to protect you and your baby." For the first time since Isadora was born, I felt validated. Someone believed me. Someone understood that my fear wasn't paranoia. It was self-preservation. Dr. Hill suggested I join a support group for new mothers. I was hesitant, worried about leaving Isadora or bringing her somewhere new. But my mom offered to watch her during the meetings, and I desperately needed to talk to someone who wasn't family. The group met in a community center downtown. There were 8 other women, all with babies under a year old. The facilitator, Skylar, had a gentle voice and kind eyes. She asked each of us to share only what we felt comfortable with. When my turn came, I just said I was dealing with a difficult separation and adjusting to being a single mom. After the meeting, a woman named Renee approached me. She had twins, just a few months older than Isadora. She told me she'd left her husband after he became controlling during her pregnancy. I felt an immediate connection. We exchanged numbers and started texting regularly. Having a friend who understood made a huge difference. Renee didn't judge when I texted at 3 a.m., panicking because I thought I heard someone outside. She shared resources, recommended books, and reminded me I wasn't alone. Meanwhile, Jake's behavior grew more erratic. He started sending emails to my entire family, claiming I was mentally unstable and keeping his daughter from him out of spite. He contacted my old coworkers, telling them I needed intervention. He even reached out to my college roommate, Alicia, who I hadn't spoken to in years. Alicia forwarded me the message. Jake had written a long, rambling email about how I'd changed, how I was making up stories about him, how he just wanted his family back. It was so convincing that Alicia had almost believed him. She called me, concerned, and I ended up telling her everything. She was horrified and promised to block Jake immediately. The custody hearing was scheduled for when Isadora turned 6 months old. As the date approached, Jake's harassment intensified. He created fake social media accounts to message me after I blocked his real ones. He sent letters to my parents' house, alternating between pleading and threatening. Once, he even sent flowers to Dr. Hill's office with a card thanking her for helping my wife through her delusions. I was terrified of seeing him in court. Dr. Hill helped me prepare, teaching me grounding techniques for when anxiety hit. Tara assured me I wouldn't have to speak directly to Jake, and security would be present. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. I kept imagining worst-case scenarios. What if the judge didn't believe me? What if they gave Jake unsupervised visits? What if he tried to take Isadora and run? My mom sat with me, holding Isadora while I paced. She reminded me of all the evidence we had, the videos, the threatening messages, the police reports from when he showed up at the house. Tara was confident, but still, I couldn't shake the fear. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully in a simple blue dress and low heels. I wanted to look put together, but not like I was trying too hard. My dad drove us to the courthouse while my mom stayed home with Isadora. I couldn't bear the thought of her being in the same room as Jake. Walking into the courthouse, I felt like I might throw up. Tara met us at the entrance, professional and calm in her navy suit. She briefed me again on what to expect, reminding me to stay composed no matter what Jake or his lawyer said. And then I saw him. Jake was standing near the courtroom doors, talking to a man I assumed was his lawyer. He looked thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under his eyes. When he spotted me, his expression changed from tense to something almost hungry. I froze. My dad stepped between us, and Tara quickly ushered me into a side room. She told me to take deep breaths while she went to speak with the bailiff. When she returned, she said they'd arranged for me to enter through a different door so I wouldn't have to walk past Jake. The hearing itself was a blur. Jake's lawyer painted him as a devoted father being kept from his child by an unstable mother. He suggested my trauma claims were exaggerated, possibly even fabricated for sympathy. I gripped the edge of my seat so hard my knuckles turned white. Then Tara presented our evidence. The videos from the flash drives, the threatening messages, the police reports, statements from the hospital nurses who had witnessed Jake's controlling behavior. As each piece was shown, I could feel Jake's eyes boring into me from across the room. When the judge called a recess to review everything, I rushed to the bathroom and threw up. Tara followed me, holding my hair back and offering a bottle of water. She told me I was doing great, that the judge seemed sympathetic to our case. Back in the courtroom, the judge announced his decision. Jake would be granted supervised visitation only, once a month, at a family center with a court-appointed supervisor present. He would undergo psychological evaluation and complete parenting classes before any change to the arrangement would be considered. Relief washed over me. It wasn't perfect. I wished Jake could be kept away completely, but it was better than I'd feared. As we left the courtroom, Jake called my name. I didn't turn around. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Isadora was safe. I was safe. We had time to figure out our next steps without the immediate threat of Jake having access to her. But my relief was short-lived. 2 days after the hearing, I took Isadora for a walk in her stroller. It was the first time I'd felt comfortable going out alone. We went to a small park near my parents' house. I was pushing her on the infant swing when I noticed a man watching us from a bench. It took me a moment to realize it was Jake. I grabbed Isadora and practically ran home, calling my dad as I went. By the time he got outside, Jake was gone. We called the police, but without proof he'd approached us or said anything threatening. There wasn't much they could do. Technically, being in a public park wasn't violating the protective order as long as he stayed a certain distance away. I was back to square one, afraid to leave the house. Dr. Hill suggested I document these accidental encounters, as they could establish a pattern of stalking. Tara agreed, saying we could use it to strengthen the protective order. Over the next few weeks, Jake seemed to be everywhere. I'd see him at the grocery store, at the coffee shop where Renee and I met for playdates, even driving past my therapist's office as I was leaving. Each time he'd make eye contact but never approach. Each time I'd report it, but nothing could be done. My dad installed security cameras around the house. My brother-in-law Theo, who worked in IT, set up an app that would alert everyone in the family if the cameras detected movement at night. We changed our routines, never going to the same place at the same time on the same day of the week. Despite these precautions, I still felt watched. One morning, I found a stuffed bear on the front porch. No note, no package, just sitting there as if someone had placed it carefully. The cameras hadn't picked up anyone approaching the house. I threw the bear away without letting it inside. Isadora's first supervised visit with Jake was scheduled for a Saturday morning at the family center. I was a nervous wreck. Tara reminded me that trained professionals would be present the entire time, and Jake wouldn't be allowed to take Isadora out of the room. Still, I considered not showing up. In the end, I went because I had to follow the court order. The family center was a cheerful building with colorful walls and toys everywhere. The supervisor, a woman named Jasmine, explained the rules to both of us separately. Jake would have 1 hour with Isadora. I would wait in a separate room. If at any point Jasmine felt uncomfortable, she would end the visit immediately. I handed Isadora to Jasmine, kissing her forehead before letting go. That hour was the longest of my life. I sat in the waiting room, checking my phone every 2 minutes, ready to rush in at the slightest hint something was wrong. When Jasmine finally brought Isadora back, I searched my daughter for any sign of distress. She seemed fine, maybe a little tired. Jasmine reported that the visit had gone well. Jake had held Isadora, read her a book, played with some toys. Nothing concerning had happened. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt uneasy. Jake had been on his best behavior, of course. He was smart enough to know this was all being documented. What would happen if he ever got unsupervised visits? As we were leaving, I noticed Jake watching us from his car in the parking lot. He wasn't supposed to be there. The rules stated we had to arrive and depart at different times to avoid contact. I hurried to my car, strapped Isadora in her seat, and locked the doors. As I pulled out, Jake followed. I called my dad, telling him Jake was tailing me. He told me to drive straight to the police station. I could see Jake's car a few cars behind me in my rearview mirror. My hands shook on the steering wheel. At a red light, he pulled up beside me and rolled down his window. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to look at him. When the light turned green, I made a sudden turn toward the police station. Jake's car continued straight ahead. By the time I reached the station, he was nowhere in sight. I filed another report, but the officer's response was frustratingly familiar. Without direct threats or contact, there wasn't much they could do. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. "She looks just like you. I can't wait until she's old enough to understand who her real father is." I showed the message to Tara the next day. She immediately filed for a violation of the protective order. The hearing was set for the following week. In the meantime, she suggested I stay somewhere Jake wouldn't expect. Not at my parents' house, not at Gabby's. Renee offered her guest room. Her husband had moved out months ago, and she had plenty of space for me and Isadora. I accepted gratefully. We didn't tell anyone except my immediate family where we were staying. The night before the hearing, I put Isadora to bed in the portable crib Renee had set up. I was exhausted but too anxious to sleep. Around midnight, I heard a noise outside. Probably just the wind, I told myself. But then I heard it again. A distinct scratching sound at the window. I texted Renee, who was in the next room. She came in immediately, phone in hand, ready to call 911. We peeked through the blinds together and saw a dark figure moving across the backyard. Renee hit the panic button on her security system. Lights flooded the yard and an alarm blared. The figure ran. The police arrived within minutes. They found footprints in the soft dirt beneath the window and a screwdriver dropped nearby. Someone had been trying to get in. I knew it was Jake, even without proof. We didn't sleep that night. In the morning, Renee's brother came to stay with us while we went to the hearing. This time, I brought Isadora. I wasn't letting her out of my sight. At the courthouse, security was tighter than before. Tara had requested additional measures given the break-in attempt. Jake arrived with a different lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit. He tried to approach me in the hallway, but a bailiff stepped between us. The hearing was brief, but intense. Jake's lawyer argued there was no proof the text came from Jake, or that he was the person at Renee's house. He suggested I was seeing threats where none existed, further evidence of my unstable mental state. Tara countered with a timeline of Jake's escalating behavior, the coincidental appearances at places I frequented, the gifts left with no sender, the car following me after the supervised visit. When combined with the text and break-in attempt, the pattern was clear. The judge agreed. He extended the protective order for a full year and suspended Jake's supervised visits pending completion of a psychological evaluation and anger management course. He also ordered Jake to surrender any firearms and stay at least 500 feet away from me, Isadora, and any place we regularly visited. As we left the courtroom, I felt Jake's eyes on me again. I clutched Isadora tighter and kept walking. Outside, Tara congratulated me on the ruling, but warned me to stay vigilant. Jake had shown he wasn't going to give up easily. We returned to my parents' house that afternoon. With the strengthened protective order and Jake's visits suspended, I felt safer there than at Renee's. My dad had upgraded the security system again, adding motion sensors and glass break detectors. For a few weeks, things were quiet. No sightings of Jake, no strange texts, no gifts left on the porch. I started to relax a little. Isadora was growing so fast, sitting up on her own now, babbling constantly. I took her to the park again, went shopping with my mom, even had coffee with Renee without constantly looking over my shoulder. Then the emails started. Not from Jake directly, but from people we knew in common. Friends from college, former coworkers, distant relatives, all saying the same thing. Jake had reached out to them, concerned about my mental health. He'd told them I was suffering from postpartum psychosis, that I was keeping his daughter from him because of paranoid delusions. Some people just forwarded his messages with a quick, "Thought you should see this." Others asked if I was okay, if there was anything they could do to help. A few actually seemed to believe him, suggesting maybe I should hear him out or get help. I was furious. Jake had found a way to harass me without violating the protective order. He was trying to isolate me, to make people doubt me. I forwarded everything to Tara, who said we could use it to show a pattern of continued harassment, but it would be hard to prove these contacts were threatening enough to violate the order. Dr. Hill suggested I draft a simple response to anyone who contacted me. "Thank you for your concern. I'm safe and well, but dealing with a difficult situation involving my ex-husband. I appreciate your support and understanding of my privacy at this time." It was neutral enough not to escalate things, but clear enough to counter Jake's narrative. Most people were understanding once I responded, but the damage was done. I felt exposed, vulnerable. Jake had turned my social circle into a battlefield, and I had no idea who I could trust. One evening, my mom was giving Isadora a bath while I sorted through some old clothes she'd outgrown. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I wouldn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was a woman named Morgan. She introduced herself as Jake's coworker. At first, I was ready to hang up, assuming this was another of Jake's manipulation tactics. But then she said something that made me freeze. "I think you should know Jake has pictures of your daughter all over his desk. Recent ones. He shows them to everyone, talking about how he sees her all the time." My blood ran cold. The only recent photos of Isadora were ones I'd shared privately with family or posted on my locked social media accounts. How did Jake have them? Morgan explained that she'd overheard Jake talking about following me, about watching me through windows. She'd thought he was just a heartbroken dad missing his kid until she heard him on the phone, saying he was making progress on his plan to get his family back, one way or another. I I thanked her for calling, my voice shaking. After hanging up, I immediately called Tara. She said Morgan's information could help us, but we'd need her to make an official statement. I wasn't sure Morgan would be willing to go that far. That night, I checked all the windows twice before going to bed. I put Isadora's crib in my room instead of the nursery. Every noise made me jump. Around 3 a.m., I heard a distinct click from my phone. The screen lit up with a notification. Your location has been shared with Jake. I nearly screamed. How was this possible? I'd changed all my passwords, checked for tracking apps, even had Theo scan my phone for spyware. I woke my dad, showing him the notification with trembling hands. Theo came over first thing in the morning. He took my phone apart, checking every component. Finally, he found it. A tiny tracking device hidden inside the case. It wasn't connected to any app I had installed. Someone had physically placed it there. I tried to think when Jake could have had access to my phone. The only possibility was during one of his coincidental appearances, maybe bumping into me at the coffee shop or park. I hadn't let my phone out of my sight, but he was clever. He must have found a way. Theo removed the tracker and helped me get a new phone with a different number. We didn't activate any location services just to be safe. I felt violated all over again. Jake had been watching me, tracking me, all this time. Tara suggested we file for another emergency hearing based on this new evidence. The tracker was proof Jake had violated the protective order. Combined with Morgan's information about the photos and his statements at work, we had a strong case. But before we could file anything, Jake made his move. I was home alone with Isadora. My parents had gone to a doctor's appointment and Gabby was at work. It was a normal afternoon. I'd just put Isadora down for her nap and was folding laundry in the living room when I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the window, I saw a delivery truck. A man in a uniform approached the door with a large package. I wasn't expecting anything, but deliveries for the baby were common enough that I didn't think twice about opening the door. The man asked me to sign for the package. As I reached for his electronic pad, he looked up, and I found myself staring into Jake's eyes. He disguised himself with a fake beard and hat, but I would recognize those eyes anywhere. I tried to slam the door, but he was faster. He pushed his way inside, dropping the fake package. I screamed and ran for the kitchen, grabbing my phone from the counter. Jake caught me before I could dial 911, knocking the phone from my hand. I just want to see her, he said, his voice eerily calm. You can't keep her from me. She's mine too. I remembered what Dr. Hill had taught me about staying calm in crisis situations. Jake fed off fear and reaction. I took a deep breath and tried to speak evenly. I told him he was violating the protective order, that the police would be here soon. I reminded him that if he left now, before anything happened, he might still have a chance at supervised visits in the future. Jake laughed, a hollow sound that made my skin crawl. I'm done playing by your rules, he said. I'm taking my daughter, and we're going somewhere you'll never find us. He started toward the hallway that led to the bedrooms. I couldn't let him reach Isadora. I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy glass vase, and swung it at him. It connected with his shoulder, making him stumble. I used that moment to run past him, positioning myself between him and the hallway. Jake's face contorted with rage. He lunged at me, grabbing my arms so hard I knew they would bruise. I fought back with everything I had, kicking, scratching, screaming. We crashed into the coffee table, sending books and magazines flying. In the struggle, my hand found my phone on the floor. I managed to hit the emergency SOS button before Jake knocked it away again. He didn't notice what I'd done. Stop fighting me, he shouted. This is all your fault. If you'd just been a good wife, a good mother, none of this would be happening. I heard Isadora crying from the bedroom, woken by the noise. The sound seemed to fuel Jake's determination. He shoved me hard against the wall and made a break for the hallway. I scrambled after him, grabbing his legs. We both fell to the floor. Jake kicked out, catching me in the stomach. The pain was blinding, but I held on. I couldn't let him reach Isadora. Just as Jake broke free from my grip, the front door burst open. My neighbor, Anthony, rushed in. He was a retired police officer who lived across the street. He must have heard the commotion or seen the struggle through the window. Anthony tackled Jake to the ground, pinning him there with surprising strength for a man in his 60s. Police are on their way, he told me calmly. Go check on your baby. I ran to Isadora, scooping her up from her crib. She was red-faced from crying, but otherwise unharmed. I held her close, my whole body shaking with adrenaline and relief. From the living room, I could hear Jake shouting threats, cursing at Anthony. I stayed in the bedroom with Isadora until I heard sirens outside. Only then did I venture out. The police arrested Jake on the spot for violating the protective order and breaking and entering. As they led him out in handcuffs, he looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes, only a cold, calculating hatred that told me this wasn't over. But for now, we were safe. Anthony stayed with me until my parents returned, explaining what had happened. My mom took Isadora while my dad hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. When he finally let go, I saw tears in his eyes. It's over, he said. He's not going to hurt you again. I wanted to believe him, but as I looked around at the destroyed living room, at the fake delivery package Jake had used to trick me, at the bruises already forming on my arms, I knew the truth. It wouldn't be over until Jake was completely out of our lives, and I was finally ready to do whatever it took to make that happen. I called Tara right away. I was still shaking when I told her what happened with Jake. She came over immediately, taking pictures of my bruises and the damage to the living room. She told me this was exactly what we needed to get Jake locked up for a while. The police had already taken him to the station, and she was going to make sure they kept him there. My parents insisted on staying with me and Isadora that night. None of us slept much. Every little noise made me jump. I kept checking on Isadora, making sure she was still breathing, still safe. My mom finally took over baby duty around 4 a.m. and forced me to at least lie down for a few hours. The next morning, Tara called with an update. Jake was being charged with multiple offenses: violating the protective order, breaking and entering, assault, and attempted kidnapping. The judge had denied bail given his history of escalating behavior. I felt a wave of relief knowing he was locked up, at least for now. I spent the day giving statements to the police and meeting with a victim advocate named Zoe. She helped me understand what would happen next with Jake's case and connected me with resources for trauma support. My bruises were darkening, and my whole body ached from the fight, but I was alive. Isadora was safe. That's what mattered. A few days later, I got a call from Morgan, Jake's coworker. She'd heard about his arrest and wanted to know if I was okay. I thanked her for the warning call she'd given me earlier. She hesitated, then told me there was more I should know. We met at a coffee shop near my parents' house. Gabby came with me for support and to help with Isadora. Morgan looked nervous, constantly checking over her shoulder as if expecting Jake to appear despite being in jail. I should have told you sooner, she said, sliding a USB drive across the table. Jake had been planning this for months. He kept a journal on his work computer, detailing everything. How he was going to get Isadora, where he was going to take her. I stared at the small drive, afraid to touch it. How did you get this? Morgan explained that after Jake's arrest, their company's IT department had searched his computer for any work files they needed. They'd found the journal instead and reported it to management. Morgan had made a copy before they turned everything over to the police. There's something else, she said, lowering her voice. Jake wasn't working alone. His parents were helping him. My stomach dropped. Jake's parents, Ellen and Robert, had always seemed so normal. A bit traditional maybe, but kind. They'd sent me flowers after Isadora was born, though I'd never let them visit due to the situation with Jake. According to Morgan, they'd been sending Jake money for his custody battle and had helped him set up a place to take Isadora once he got her. They believed everything Jake told them about me being unstable and keeping their granddaughter from them out of spite. I gave the USB drive to Tara immediately. She had it analyzed and confirmed what Morgan had said. Jake had detailed plans to kidnap Isadora and take her to a cabin his parents owned in a remote area upstate. He'd even researched countries with weak extradition laws. The evidence was damning. Jake's case wouldn't go to trial for months, but his parents were now under investigation too. Tara filed for an emergency hearing to extend the protective order to include Jake's parents. The judge granted it without hesitation. For the first time since Isadora was born, I felt like I could breathe. Jake was in jail. His parents couldn't come near us. The immediate danger had passed, but I still jumped at every noise. I still checked the locks 3 times before bed. I still woke up in a cold sweat from nightmares about Jake breaking in, taking Isadora, hurting me. Dr. Hill said this was normal, that trauma doesn't just disappear when the threat is gone. Recovery isn't linear, she told me during our session. Some days will be better than others. The important thing is that you're safe now, and you're taking steps to heal. I tried to focus on those steps. I continued therapy twice a week. I joined a support group specifically for survivors of intimate partner violence. I started looking for a place of my own, somewhere Jake had never been, somewhere we could start fresh. My parents helped me find a small 2-bedroom apartment in a secure building with a doorman. It was close enough to them that they could visit easily, but far enough that I felt independent. Moving day was emotional. As much as I wanted my own space, leaving the safety of my parents' home was scary. The first night in our new place, I barely slept. Every creak and groan of the unfamiliar building had me on baked alert. I'd installed extra locks, a security system, and cameras, but still didn't feel completely safe. I kept Isadora's crib right next to my bed. Slowly, we settled into a routine. I found a daycare nearby for Isadora so I could start working part-time from home. My sister helped me redecorate, filling the apartment with bright colors and new furniture. Nothing that reminded me of my life with Jake. Renee and her twins visited often for playdates. 3 months after Jake's arrest, his trial date was set. Tara prepared me for what to expect. I would have to testify, to describe the abuse during my pregnancy, the birth, the stalking, the attack. The thought made me physically ill, but I knew I had to do it. For Isadora. For myself. The week before the trial, I got a letter from Ellen, Jake's mom. It had been screened by my lawyer first to make sure it didn't contain threats. I almost didn't read it, but curiosity won out. The letter was an apology. Ellen wrote that she and Robert had been completely taken in by Jake's lies. They'd believed him when he said I was keeping Isadora from them out of spite. They'd believed him when he said he just wanted to be a father to his daughter. But after seeing the evidence, the videos, the journal entries, the tracking devices, they couldn't deny the truth anymore. She ended by saying they wouldn't contest the protective order and would respect my wishes regarding Isadora. They hoped someday I might allow them to know their granddaughter, but understood if that never happened. I didn't know how to feel about the letter. Part of me was relieved they weren't going to fight me. Part of me was still angry they'd enabled Jake for so long. I put the letter away, deciding I didn't need to make any decisions about it right now. The day of the trial arrived. I wore a simple blue dress, professional but not too formal. My mom came with me to watch Isadora while I testified. My dad and Gabby came for moral support. Dr. Hill had helped me prepare mentally, but nothing could really ready me for seeing Jake again. He looked different in his orange jumpsuit, thinner and somehow smaller than I remembered. When they brought him in, he didn't look at me at first, but as I took the stand, his eyes locked onto mine. I felt a chill run down my spine but forced myself to look away, focusing instead on Tara's encouraging nod. Testifying was even harder than I'd imagined. Having to describe the abuse, the stalking, the attack, all while Jake watched, was excruciating. His lawyer tried to paint me as unstable, suggesting I'd exaggerated or even invented incidents due to postpartum depression. But the evidence spoke for itself. The videos Jake had taken without my knowledge, the tracking device, the detailed kidnapping plans, the bruises from his attack. When it was over, I felt drained but also lighter somehow, like I'd set down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for too long. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning with a guilty verdict on all counts. Jake was sentenced to 8 years in prison with no possibility of parole for at least 5. The judge also granted a permanent restraining order that would remain in effect even after his release. Jake would never be allowed near me or Isadora again. As they led him away, Jake finally spoke directly to me. "This isn't over," he said, his voice cold. "She's still my daughter." The bailiff quickly silenced him, but his words hung in the air. I refused to let them scare me. Jake had no power over us anymore. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by my family, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Not just relief that the immediate danger was past, but actual hope for our future. Isadora was growing so fast. already trying to pull herself up to stand, babbling her first attempts at words. She deserved a life filled with joy and safety, not overshadowed by fear. In the months that followed, we settled into our new normal. I went back to work full-time, finding a job I could do mostly from home. Isadora thrived at daycare, making friends and learning new skills every day. I made friends too, other moms from daycare, neighbors in our building, people from my support group who understood what I'd been through. I even started dating again, very cautiously. Nothing serious, just coffee or lunch with guys Renee or Gabby introduced me to. Most of the dates were awkward or boring, but it felt good to remember I was more than just a survivor, more than just Isadora's mom. A year after Jake's sentencing, I received notice that he was trying to file for visitation rights from prison. Tara assured me it was a long shot given his conviction and the permanent restraining order, but we'd need to respond. I was angry at first. How dare he still try to control us? But then I realized something important. I wasn't afraid anymore. Jake could file all the petitions he wanted. He could make all the threats in the world, but he couldn't hurt us now. The judge denied Jake's petition without even requiring a hearing. His parents never contested the protective order against them, though Ellen sent birthday and Christmas cards for Isadora through my lawyer. I kept them in a box, undecided about whether I'd ever show them to her. As Isadora's second birthday approached, I found myself reflecting on how far we'd come. The nightmares had mostly stopped. I no longer checked the locks multiple times before bed. I could take Isadora to the park without constantly scanning for threats. We had a small party at my parents' house, just family, Renee and her twins, and a few friends from daycare. Watching Isadora toddle around the yard, laughing as she chased bubbles my dad was blowing, I felt a profound sense of peace. That night, after putting a tired, cake-smeared Isadora to bed, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Hill, checking in as she sometimes did on significant days. I smiled as I typed my response. We're doing great, really great, and we were. Our life wasn't perfect. I still had bad days when memories would hit unexpectedly. I still worried about what I'd tell Isadora when she was old enough to ask about her father. I still had moments of anger about everything Jake had taken from us. But we were safe. We were loved. We were building a life that was ours alone, free from fear and control. As I looked out at the city lights, I made a silent promise to Isadora and to myself. We would never let Jake define our story. What happened with him was just one chapter in our lives, not the whole book. And I was making sure the rest of our story would be filled with joy, strength, and freedom. The next morning, Isadora woke me up by patting my face with her tiny hands. "Mama," she said clearly, one of the few words she could say perfectly. I pulled her into a hug, breathing in her sweet baby smell. "Good morning, sunshine," I whispered. "Ready for a new day?" She nodded enthusiastically, already squirming to get down and start playing. I watched her toddle off to find her favorite stuffed elephant, her little legs still unsteady but getting stronger every day, just like her mama.